Hello interwebs and welcome to my channel. So for this video, I'm actually going to be doing a quick analysis of the Orville Season 2 premiere episode. Obviously, I'm a huge Star Trek fan, and by extension, the Orville. I actually really kind of weirdly enjoy the Orville. It's not the world's greatest show. My thoughts on the Orville are really kind of like it's comfort food. It's basically a reimagining or an updating of Star Trek The Next Generation, almost to a T, from noted Star Trek fan and Family Guy creator Seth MacFarlane. So the show is sort of trying to be a new Star Trek The Next Generation updated for today, but also kind of being a comedy. And it doesn't always work in my opinion. I don't think it's an amazing show by any means. I think it's kind of very surface level and kind of meandering in a lot of aspects instead of like Star Trek The Next Generation, which in its heyday was very targeted and deeply philosophical. But again, the Orville kind of plays off of those tropes and ideas, and every once in a while it does a decent job, and it's also kind of fun. Like I said, comfort food. It's not like something like Star Trek Discovery or even something like Deep Space Nine, which I consider the best Star Trek, which I think goes into a much deeper and is deeper detail and is actually took the Trek franchise to further and further heights. I know a lot of people would argue about that. There's quite a few fans out there who are like, the Orville's better than Star Trek Discovery, which frankly I find ridiculous. Like I said, I like the Orville. I enjoy it. It's like pulling out my favorite bag of chips instead of having a nice meal, which both are perfectly fine and warranted, but the Orville is by no means peak amazing Star Trek and by no means the arbiter of what Star Trek is in today's world. Sorry, it's not. But anyways, with my overall thoughts on the show aside, like I said, I do enjoy the Orville, and I actually wanted to give a quick Season 2 premiere breakdown. So I actually have a few notes right here that I wrote on this handy-dandy piece of paper. I know, very old technology. And because I have said it now in the video, it means it's not a problem with the structure of the video. You just have to deal with it. And I'm going to keep this brief because, as you can see, I'm actually not at my normal apartment. I'm actually at my girlfriend's place visiting in Los Angeles for New Year's. So, like I said, I'll probably be doing more of these and longer ones, but for this one I'm just going to be trying to do it a little bit quicker just because I wanted to kind of get it out there for the premiere, but I don't want to waste too much time because I want to actually spend time with my girlfriend because I love her. So this episode, it was a very strange episode. It seemed to be dealing with a lot of relationships and dating topics. There was, I think, 3 or 4 plots going on. All around the idea that the ship was going to board his home planet because he has to pee, because his species can only pee once a year, and when they pee, it's a sort of a cleansing ritual. Now, that idea sounds stupid, but it was actually something that I really, really liked. And I think that is something that this show could actually use to its advantage very well, in the sense that it's a very weird thing talk about peeing and urinating. Like, that's not something that you would think of, like, with, like, Jean-Luc Picard, Mr. Shakespeare extraordinaire, would be talking about urinating. And so I think that the Orville can kind of be a much more, like, everyday kind of Trek show, which I think is super, super interesting, and that's not something that we really, really see. And like I said, I know it's trying to be something, it's not Star Trek, but it really is Star Trek. It's very much trying to be Star Trek. So I kind of liked that, and I kind of liked them being like, oh, it's about urinating, but it's taking it to this next level where it's actually a cleansing ritual and something different and new, and being this sort of like this weird, humorous take, but then actually making it philosophically interesting. That was an interesting idea. Unfortunately, the episode kind of just used it basically kind of as like a conceit. Like, oh, we're going to this planet, it's going to be a ritual, and people bring dates to it. So it's kind of unfortunate that it really wasn't explored more. That was actually the one piece of this episode that I thought was probably the most interesting and could have been developed further. I know it could have just evolved into a lot of urinating jokes, is probably what it would have been if we had gone further down that path, so maybe it's for the best. But it was something that I found a little bit interesting and something that I think was very Trekkian in its overall message, but also very Orvillian and Seth MacFarlane. very Seth MacFarlane in its sort of impetus and conceit. So yeah, very good. Good there. Good on them. So the next one that I want to talk about is the Isaac and Claire storyline. So Isaac being the robot and Claire. Isaac being the robot who's like trying to learn more about humans, trying to be like the Data character, but a bit more of an asshole than Data was. And Claire, who's the doctor. They've been trying to put Isaac and Claire. They did this back in season 1 of a lot of storylines of Isaac and Claire kind of ending up together, and Isaac learning about humanity through Claire's children, and Claire learning more about how to take care of her children through Isaac and his sort of like pragmatic view of the world, which has been kind of interesting and cool. It gets a bit repetitive in this episode because, like I said, we've seen it in a couple episodes before with like Claire trying to learn better ways to take care of her kid, and Isaac coming in and being like, oh, I have this idea. It kind of plays out a little bit differently in the end of this one. Isaac kind of solves the mystery rather conveniently, a mystery that we are already kind of aware of. Yeah, the thing with the Isaac and Claire storyline is there was no real point to it. It felt like, at first it seemed like, oh, it was going to be about Claire connecting with her kid more because her kid was kind of like standing off and being reserved and growing up and being that kind of teenager, like, I hate my parents. But it didn't end up being about that. It ended up being about Claire defending her kid against these other parents who, like, obviously didn't know that their kid was a shitbag. To use a weird word. I don't know, shitbag. That's an interesting one. I've never really used that one before. Anyway, yeah, so these parents didn't know that their kid was a shitbag, and Claire ends up defending them with Isaac's help, and Claire starts having feelings for Isaac, which, from what I can tell, will probably be a recurring storyline, considering how often they've shoved Claire and Isaac together. So my bet would be that Claire and Isaac will probably be a further developing relationship, which I'm totally down for. It'd be interesting to see, like a robot learning how to be with a single mom. That's kind of an interesting conceit, and I'm down for it. But in this episode, that storyline, other than that end goal of like, oh, those two are going to be together, the story felt pointless. There was no real need for it to exist. Like, I don't know what I was supposed to learn. I don't know what the characters really learned. The one thing I will say about the storyline, I should say, and again, this goes back to this whole, what I think the Orville can do interestingly, is there's that one scene where the kids sort of jigger the replicator thing to give them a vodka bottle, which they shouldn't have because they're underage. Which, again, that is a distinctly interesting thing. They sort of taking this universe of this trick style and then making it every day, because like that's totally something kids would do. Like, kids today do that, sneak into liquor cabinets. So kids trying to fuck with a replicator and get vodka would actually happen. And that's actually an interesting conceit. But again, I wish they had done more with it, but again, I don't know much more you do with it, but those moments, those small moments like that are stuff that I really, really like. When you take sort of like this big Trek ideal and make it everyday and relatable, and sort of these taking these big philosophical concepts and making them everyday and relatable, which Trek did, but typically through metaphor. And what I think the Orville could do really well is when it does it through like actually relating it to like everyday experience, like urinating or kids trying to steal a vodka bottle. It's two different approaches, but still kind of goes to this big Trek philosophy, which I think the show wants to get at, and I'll talk more about that later because that's my main crux with this episode and the show in general. So next thing that I wanted to talk about, so we have Alara and Gordon, both going on first dates. And again, these stories are like weirdly repetitive because it's about both of these characters going on first dates. And Alara actually goes on this first date with this guy, and he turns out to be kind of an idiot and like weirdly overbearing. And again, there's no real resolution to that. It's like she goes on a date, he's like, oh yeah, I'll give it a try. And then the other guy is just like weird, and then it's done. Like, that's it. Like, there's no like, get away from me, you're being really weird. There's no escalation of that. There's no like comedic like, oh, it's too much. It's like standard. It's just like, oh, he sends a creepy text, he has shitty poetry, and then she just leaves. Like, again, what did she learn? Like, not to go on dates? Or, like, dating is gonna be hard? I mean, she doesn't learn anything other than, like, this dude's weird. And we get, like, mild comedy out of it. Like, nothing I hadn't seen before. So that was kind of dumb. And Gordon, doing a similar thing, was like, oh, I want to go on a first date with this girl. I want to ask her out. And I don't have the confidence to do that. And then he doesn't. Like, that's the story. He's like, oh, I'm going to try and ask her out. I'm going to get the confidence. And then immediately does not ask her out. He just walks around, which was fun. That was a funny moment when he, like, sort of walks around the table. And he's like, nope, not going to do it. And just ends. I don't know if it's, like, trying to be anti-comedy, which is fine. I'm fine with you subverting the expectations. Like, oh, he doesn't go out on the date. But it's like, what was the point? You know, you can do an anti-comedy or subvert my expectations and have them do something, but it's like, I need to have a reason for that. And I felt like both these Alara and I mean every storyline in this episode besides one, this Alara and Gordon storyline could have really just, you could have mashed them together into one, and like maybe Gordon was going on a date with Alara, or Alara, the guy that Alara was dating, was having a lack of confidence dating her, and then he was basically like, oh yeah, I was just being weird and I want to try it. And then so she learns to like keep giving things a try, and he learns to be more confident in himself. Like, she's like, oh, you're weird, I want to kind of run away. And he's like, I'm sorry, I was being weird, I was being lacking confidence. Let's start over. It's like, I will be more confident, and then that way I won't be a weirdo. And she learns that she should take the chance to like get to know somebody before making snap judgments. There you go. I mean, your thematic thing, and I combined your two stories. Yeah, it's just, these two just didn't work. Like, they could have. They just needed, I feel like, one more scene each, or to be somehow combined, to actually make them mean anything. Because as it stands, they just kind of end, and there's no point. It's like, okay. So yeah, God, yeah, it was just very unfortunate. The story that I did kind of like, though I have some problems with it, is I did like Seth MacFarlane's character, whose name I forget. I just call him Seth MacFarlane every time I watch him. Ed? I think it's Ed. But I just, like, it's just so Seth MacFarlane in my brain. I do like his character. I think he's an interesting character. I don't mean to disparage the character. I just think of him as Seth MacFarlane for whatever reason. And then also Kelly, his relationship with his ex-wife Kelly. So I was a little surprised in this episode because I thought that they had resolved and like were about to pick things back up at the end of last season. But then this season is like she's gone off and she's dating someone else. And I guess the implication is it's been a few years almost since the last episode, I would even expect, because I think Bortus's kid at UC has grown up and we saw the kid be born last season. So, I mean, unless their species ages at a different rate, which is possible. But it's at least, it seems to me it's been at least a year or so. Maybe more. So, yeah, there is that thing going on. But anyways, with this relationship, taking in this episode, Ed wants to get back with Kelly, but Kelly's dating someone else, and Ed kind of has to learn to get over it. And I did like this storyline, Ed kind of being overbearing and like being like, oh, I want to know who you're dating, and being this sort of like over-controlling ex who still kind of wants to try and make things work and learn to be better. And I thought there was a scene where where Kelly's like, oh, Ed's going to be, he's going to try and be classy about it. And then you see the shuttle come in the background with Ed in it. Was actually really funny. And again, taking Star Trek and doing something interesting with the setting of Star Trek and that sort of Trek sci-fi world, and doing something funny within that. Using the world around them to create interesting comedy. Which is, I think, sometimes the show does, and most of the time the show doesn't. And then eventually, and so I liked this character arc. I liked them having this back and forth. The one thing I thought was weird is Kelly is now arguing, is like, oh, we can't date because it would be a conflict of interest to you as the captain. Like, you can't date me because you'd have a conflict of interest. Well, first off, the fact that he has feelings for you and that you are his ex-wife, already is a conflict of interest. It's already existing. So that's, that's just gonna be there, no matter what you do. And secondly, Ed made that argument in season 1. Like, I know he was kind of being overbearing or sort of like a whiny man-child in those episodes. That was a joke. But Ed, in season 1, made the point of saying, like, you cannot be my second officer because of a conflict of interest. And that it would be just a problem. Which he was right. I mean, he was doing it for the wrong reasons, but he was right. And then it seems weird to just have her character turn around and sort of parrot that back at him as if she's righteous. I don't mean to, like... she's right. I think she's right. And I think the right thing to do would be for her to transfer off the ship, which she threatens to do. But again, like, that whole relationship and that whole aspect of it bothers me because, like, she took the first officer position because she wanted Ed to be captain, even though he didn't deserve it, and she clearly did. And there's some weird power male fantasy stuff going on there. Not to delve too much into that aspect of things, but it just rubs me the wrong way. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's not terrible, but it just rubs me the wrong way, and it was weird to see that come up again in this episode as, like, the main conflict between the two of them. But like I said, I did like how Ed at the end went and saw the other guy and sort of, like, passed the torch and was like, oh, hey, I know her and I can help you, and, it's nothing new. Like, I've seen that before in other comedies, but, it was a decent character arc, and at least an arc that resolved itself and felt complete. Like, there was a point to it, each scene kind of added to that point, and it resolved. As opposed to the other arcs in this episode where they either didn't end, or all the pieces of them didn't really clearly build to the same whole. It's like the Isaac and Claire thing, like, those pieces didn't really add up to anything. So the Ed and Kelly scenes actually felt like cohesive storytelling. Which gets me to the main crux of my problem with the Orville in general. And I don't want to be so negative on it because I want to like it. And there are episodes of the Orville that I really like. Like last season, there was one about social media that I really liked. There was one about religion where they went to the planet that, like, had never seen outer space and tried to open them up to that concept of outer space and that there's more than just their small world. Those are good episodes. Those are good, interesting explorations of philosophy and, like, modern technology in a way that feels like palatable for everyone, like on a network television show, and also kind of uses the setting in an interesting way and also plays off the comedy of that. However, the Orville tends to, in many episodes, and in this one it's also one of the major problems, to just forget that it's a sci-fi show and forget that it's a Star Trekian kind of show, in that a lot of the situations and the comedy are irrelevant to it being on a spaceship. Like, all of the dating things could have happened anywhere else. I've seen them elsewhere. I've seen them in other comedy shows. I've seen them in half-hour comedies. I've seen them all over the place. And it's like, that's fine. It's not like every Star Trek episode, was all about using cool, crazy sci-fi concepts. That's fine. But you should be using your setting in interesting ways. And outside of a couple gags, like here and there, like the shuttle and the vodka thing, it didn't use it at all. There was nothing special about it being on a Star Trek ship. And it's like, okay, that's fine, but if, like, most of your episodes are like that, which I hope season 2 isn't going to repeat, but it's sort of a disappointing start. Though I think this episode might have been at the end of season 1 and they moved it to the beginning of season 2 last year. I don't know why. So it's possible this is actually just part of season 1 that's airing at the beginning of season 2. But, yeah, the main problem I have with it is, like, there's no... Why make the show if you're not going to use the gifts that you're giving yourself? Like that, you're giving yourself some interesting gifts with the setting and the world. You're basically creating Star Trek and getting to play in that playground in your own way, in a sort of more lackadaisical way that's not so hoity-toity. I'm Patrick Stewart reading Shakespeare quotes at you. I sound like Sean Connery, not Patrick Stewart. But you get the point. Like, you can do these interesting things. It's a wonderful gift. The concept of the show, I think, is great. And the tone of the show, I think, is actually very interesting for this type of show. And every once in a while, there are gems in there. But overall, you're just not using the show conceit at all. And which I'm saying, why have the show? Is the question that I ask because of that. And this gets over to my, I think that's partly because of my main problem with the Orville, is that I don't think it has a point. I think it started off as this grain of like, Seth MacFarlane's like, I want to have a Star Trek The Next Generation show, and I want to kind of make fun of it, but I also kind of want it to be a Star Trek show. Like, I want it to be funny, but it's actually really just Star Trek. Which is fine, you can do that, but there's no thrust forward. I feel like these characters are all just kind of wandering around, and there's no real, like, is the point of the show to talk about making humanity better? Is it to talk about, in this utopian future, what is everyday life like? What are average people like in a utopia instead of being on, like, one of the biggest starships? I mean, all of these are fine, and they're interesting ways to take the show, but I don't think the show has really picked it yet. It really just feels like Seth MacFarlane's writing a situational comedy that could take place anywhere, instead of actually working towards the gifts that he's given himself as a writer. Like, you have these little, you can do cool stuff as a writer with your own setting and ideas, you're just not doing it. And like I said, I don't think that the Orville's constantly doing that, like constantly failing at it, since it does have times where it does do that effectively and interestingly. But this was not one of those episodes. So yeah, if I would give this premiere probably a C. There was some funny comedy in there. I like the characters still. I like the setting still. It's nice to be back there. But there was no real grab or anything worth saying or anything done with like most of the storylines. But that all being said, I look forward to continue watching the show. And like I said, I think this episode was actually an episode from season 1 that they cut out of season 1, because I remember them saying they cut an episode from that season and stuck it at the beginning of season 2. Oh, and I also forgot Lieutenant Tyler. She's a character that was introduced this episode. We don't really learn much about her. She looks cool. Seems interesting. She's really more there for Gordon to want to date her and then end up with, like, sitting with Ed at the bar, with the implication that those two are going to get together, or at least start a relationship at some point in the near future. So I'm glad she's there, but don't really know much about her yet. We'll see. I'll sort of reserve judgment on her really until I get to know her better. So anyways, that's everything I have to say about the premiere. I will continue to watch the Orville. I do really want the show to grow and succeed, because I think there's some stuff worth doing with the concept, and I really, really hope that they can grow. And I mean, a lot of Star Trek shows kind of have growing pains. Like the first 2 seasons of Next Generation were crap, with some gems in there, like I've said. So we'll see where this goes. And I will try and review every episode like I did for this one, and we'll continue watching the Orville. So join me, and thank you so much for watching my channel. If you like this, please hit the subscribe button or the bell, or follow me at Jesse Gender. I think that's all the housekeeping stuff. So thank you so much for watching. Bye.